Hi, I'm Susan Lewis from WRTI. I'm here with writer Candace Allen. Candace is an American living in London. She's the author of Valeda, a novel about real-life African-American trumpet player Valeda Snow. Also, Soul Music, the pulse of race and music. She now lives in London, contributes to The Guardian and the BBC, and has a new book, After This, Our Redemption. She's also on the board of Chineke Orchestra, an orchestra founded in 2015, made up of young Black and minority ethnic classical musicians in the UK and Europe. Candace, good to talk to you.
Thanks for asking me.
There is so much going on in the world today, and some really horrific events in the US. What is your response and reaction to this?
Well, being so far away and also coming from a family of activists, for generations, it's hard being far away. It was hard during this quarantine to wake up early in the morning and take my iPad and see yet another killing. George Floyd happens, and the horror of it. I for one am not somebody who watches the videos because it's just too much for my heart and psyche to take. I think beyond this, what kind of twilight zone have we entered where this is commonplace? There is the elation of finding that even within, and also because of this pandemic, people decided that they weren't going to take it anymore. And I think the most triumphant thing for me was waking up the morning after they had used tear gas to clear Lafayette Park and find out that people had come back the next evening in larger numbers and more disciplined and organized. And it was like, oh my God, we're not stopping. We are not stopping. People are serious.
And if we look at all of these issues through the lens of music is always said to be something that brings people together. It also helps us find identity through different kinds of music. So what's your perspective on that? You grew up in a family listening to lots of different kinds of music and then took kind of a intellectual journey through.
An intellectual, emotional, political journey of growing up as a desegregator in a Connecticut suburb of New York. And first is all the American stuff of what you sang in school for the seasons and, Broadway, and let me really date myself and say Mickey Mouse Club and things like that. As I enter puberty and find out I may be American, but I'm not really American, not the way my other friends are. I am Negro, and that's different. And you can't do a lot of the things that they're doing. I found my way to Black music of that era, early Motown, things like Mother-in-Law, the Philly sound and so forth. That guided me into finding my way as a desegregator with one Black friend, one other family that lived in this area of town. It helped me form and become happy about my identity. Then I go into university very, during a time of huge tumult and so forth, and it becomes much more aggressively. There's Black music and there's white music, there's your music and our music, and it was part of our religion of revolution, our religion of protest and making things done. This music helped us understand ourselves, gave us strength, whereas the first civil rights movement, there was a lot more gospel and spirituals and so forth. For this second phase, the Black Power phase, we're getting a lot more from jazz. Years go by, and I end up moving out to California because I'm working in the film industry. And for the first time, that kind of black-white dichotomy is shattered by the fact that I started learning about a lot of other music through KCRW in Ton Schnabel, and I learned about Fado, and I learned about, you know, Zydeco and Afro pop and all of these other things. Fado is the blues of Portugal. I mean, you hear this, and in that time, I am also expanding my knowledge of classical music. I happened to become friends with a British conductor that came over, and it was not until I went to a rehearsal of the LA Phil, and suddenly I'm in this other environment, and I find out that there are different ways of interpreting it. It's not just set in stone. And it was a revelation. It was communicating. It was communicating body to body, brain to brain. There was something that happened in being in the hall, that happened in the molecules in the air and in your soul as these waves of music are coming back and forth, and understanding that all music has that. And so why should we be separated, from it just by racial, ethnic categories? We're only supposed to like this. They're not supposed to like that, And so finally, after being married to that conductor for a while, and then that relationship ending, in around 2010, I become aware of El Sistema in Venezuela and the West Eastern Divan, and I want orchestra in Palestine in the Middle East. I want to find out if these young people have the same tug between our music and their music that I certainly did. My generation certainly did growing up. And so I went to Venezuela, I went to Palestine, and what I realized is that when people were more on the edge of survival, they didn't care where their joy came from. Whatever fed their soul, whatever sound it came from, it didn't matter. If it spoke to them, it was fine. What I found when I was working on the book, which was in 9 and 10 years ago, was that left to their own devices, people then under the age of 35, if they were serious about music, either the listening or the performing of it, the studying of it, they had no boundaries. I think somebody who is born into a tradition has an advantage over somebody who has to learn it, who doesn't come in, it's not from, mother's milk. They're not learning at the breast, but if they are open to what it is in its essence, it can be learned, and they can also bring something else to it. And that goes as well to jazz, and to the Brazilian samba bands, with their drummers and so forth. The cross-pollination goes both ways, So jazz comes as much from early 17th and 18th, from 18th century French music as it does from African music. All of that comes together.
So are you saying that
on.
music reflects our identities, but in the sharing of music, we first of all learn about the differences, and we share the commonalities. So in that way, music can be a vehicle for bringing us together.
Absolutely. What you need is to be open to hear things, to understand that just because you don't like this one aspect of this music doesn't mean you're not going to like this one. You keep on trying. And just because this person is playing that music doesn't mean that you're not going to like it and feel that that's going to be your music. Don't be thinking about exotic programming. It's like in the US, it's February. In the UK, it's October, and everybody's doing their Black History stuff and trot out all the composers and the soloists and the this and the that. And finally, people get work, and people are happy to get work. The trained musicians are happy to get work. But what makes a real difference is to have a soloist and not just a singer singing core repertoire, that doesn't have to do with skin color, that the composers that are beginning to get a foothold in these special weeks and special programs, and now Black Lives Matter, people, yes, let's grab this and this and this, put them in the regular concerts. It is regular. It is part of the canon. They are adding to the canon, have been adding to the canon since the 19th century, and certainly now as more and more composers of color are being trained, and they come up. Some of them have started as jazz musicians and are now writing operas or music from a classical point of view. It's happening. The talent is there. Just open it.
Coming back to the racial issues that are going on right now, and the hope that maybe music can be one way to bridge differences, it sounds as if there really are ways to move ahead that can give us hope.
There really are ways to move ahead, and people want to move ahead. The problem, of course, is how are you going to support the musicians until we get in a position where they can perform again. And it is important. It is part of how humans are made, going back to when we were just humanoids. This thing of rhythm and making sounds that have something, hearing a bird and imitating it, hearing water over pebbles and wanting to duplicate that, breathing together and making sounds together and going, and that is part of humans, who humans are. And to lose it out of some full false economy, some misplaced thing about priorities, thinking somehow that buying jeans and t-shirts is more important than keeping this thing together, living, which
Right.
connects us and keeps us healthy.
Right. Well, I think you're a great example, your perspective, because you're not a professional musician, but music has clearly been central to your life, your whole life. And
Yes.
I guess we have to hope that there are enough of us out there who feel that passion. And I think there probably are, because anyone who's experienced any kind of music really and had that music with them to make them feel, either cheer them up when they're sad, or let them grieve, or comfort them in a difficult situation. Music has been so there for so many people. And so I guess to end our conversation on a positive, hopeful note, um, I have to believe that music will prevail. And
It will survive. People are always going to play. It's like, what kind, are we going to go back to the wandering minstrels with shreds and patches and troubadours, or are they going, the number may diminish in this new economy, but it will, it's part of who we are. It will continue.
Right.
And there are some of us who are going to be its guardians,
Right.
if we can actually play, guardian to guardian.
Thanks so much, Candace Allen.
Thank you for having me.